Hi everyone, Sid here back in the car. I think this is the second longest impromptu hiatus I've taken from my channel. I apologize for that. And if you're wondering, I do have a cold. I'm severely medicated, but I have a cold. So if I sound different than I usually do, that's why. So today, hopefully I'll actually get onto the highway before I finish this video. But today I would like to tell the story of how I got to my current mindset. Basically, my journey from socialism to anarchism with a not so brief period as a conspiracy theorist. So, let's start from the beginning. Like most people who were schooled here in Quebec, I was a socialist for a good part of my life. I think that's kind of the desired outcome, conscious or unconscious, of the education system. In general, I'd say most statist schooling systems are basically factories that pump out socialists. But here in Quebec, I think that it took hold particularly well. And there was some times where I spent some time back in the days of BBSs, which if you don't know what a BBS is, Google it. It's basically like a message board back before the internet. And I was arguing in favor of socialism and or communism because back then I understood the difference even less than I do now. Now my current understanding is that communism is the extreme left version of socialism. And I'm not even sure that's totally true, but that was my worldview for most of my life until 1 or 2 years after 9/11, where actually I was still a socialist back then, but one of the inciting incidents that kind of opened my eyes to the possibility of other ways to view the world and to reconsider my position of the state. Because back then, I'll tell you, there was, speaking of how I was a socialist back then, there was a time where I was arguing how great a one world government would be. It would be like, man, if we could just get the right people in government and then have a world government so that this correct group of people in charge of the whole world could, control everyone and rule out behavior that I don't like, then everything would be great. And then a couple years after 9/11, I saw the film Loose Change, which started me off on the journey. I think most people who consider themselves into alternative media started with 9/11 Truth. I think that that event is undeniably that event left an undeniable mark in the world, which will probably last forever. And Loose Change presents the case that it was basically a conspiracy. I'll get to that later, but that, like most people who consider themselves having taken the red pill, got me started on the path away from socialism, because a common part of the alternative / conspiracy theory mythos is that the Bilderbergers and the Rothschilds basically want to set up a one world government and then kill off like 80% of the population. And obviously loose change doesn't present the whole thing, but if I remember correctly, I think they do talk about globalism and the dangers of one world government. And another major takeaway of either Loose Change or the couple movies and or books that I saw after that was that it opened my eyes to the dangers of fiat banking. And I'm kind of mixing two things, so I'm not sure which one had which influence on my life. So I'll just throw in the other one right now. I forget what the delay was, but after having seen Loose Change and after having, pursued, started down the rabbit hole, a friend of mine convinced me to read the book Gods of Eden by William Bramley, which I believe is his pseudonym. And that book had major impacts on my life. The three main ones, I would say, four main ones, five, a lot. So starting with one, it got me into ancient astronauts theory, which for those of you who don't know is the preposition that the gods of old were actually aliens who were worshipped as gods and who had they were worshipped as gods, and they played a part in the creation of mankind, and they are still here. Ooh. And another impact that book had on me, if it wasn't Loose Change, Gods of Eden definitely did that, was to open me to the dangers of fiat banking and how basically debt-based currency is a really bad idea, and there can't ever be enough currency to pay back all the debt, etc., etc. I don't want to go too deep into these things because if you're watching this, either you're already convinced of everything I'm saying, or you've already rejected it and vote for Trump or Clinton or whatever. Oh, we just need to get the right person in charge. So, moving on, another impact that Gods of Eden had on me, and this I remember that day quite clearly, was that it basically made me a pantheist. I didn't have the word back then, but that was the book where I was first introduced to the notion that in the universe there's basically just energy and consciousness. And when I read that sentence, I had this aha moment, and I said, God is the sum total of all the consciousness in the universe. And my pantheism flowed from there, basically. Another thing that I learned from Gods of Eden was how capitalism and free markets are not the same thing. And I think that that's a nuance that is very important. Sadly, most people don't get that. But if you're a capitalist, if you own the means of production, and you want, and let's say you bring a new product to market, you have shit tons of incentive to close the door behind you and make sure that you're the only person offering this product. And the takeaway is that if you have capitalism without the emphasis on free markets, it leads to communism, basically, because as more and more people close down the doors to competition, you get more and more monopolies, and after a while you get the ultimate monopoly, which is the state in control of everything, which is communism. And coming back to the pantheism thing, because I just, since I opened that door, I might as well cover it. I had already rejected Christianity back then, and that story, that's another moment that I remember quite clearly. I was on a bus, and I remember thinking of, I was pondering original sin, and I was pondering, I had this like crying newborn baby, and I was like, okay, so this baby that is crying, still purple and wet and gross in the doctor's hands, is somehow tainted. And I had this strong gut feeling of no. And that was the moment that I rejected original sin. And the immediate follow-up question to that, if there's no original sin, is, well, what's the deal with Jesus? And I was already calling him Jesus of Nazareth instead of Jesus Christ before I even read Gods of Eden. I forget if this was before or after Loose Change. It doesn't really matter, but I just figured I'd throw that out there. And yeah, I don't... Oh my God, how could I forget this? Another huge takeaway, which is absolutely still true today, that Gods of Eden had on me, was that it got me totally fascinated with the whole world of secret societies and symbolism and that kind of body of knowledge. And strangely enough, it was through that fascination that I got really intrigued with the Church of Scientology and actually read Dianetics. I wasn't intrigued by Scientology as a potential prospect. I was intrigued by it when I noticed that, by my definition of secret societies, that the Church of Scientology is a secret society. I'll share that definition, which is, a secret society has two main things. It has some jargon that's incomprehensible to outsiders and hierarchical access to information. So I guess it's not a definition, but it's two necessary characteristics of, I would say necessary and sufficient characteristics of secret societies. And when basically that was triggered by the Tom Cruise on Oprah Winfrey jumping on the couch thing, and when I realized and started watching Scientology videos, also the guy who did Scientology and Me, and that clip of him absolutely screaming at the top of his lungs at that Scientologist. Those two things combined got me interested, and when I saw Scientology and Me, that's when I realized, holy shit, jargon incomprehensible to outsiders, hierarchical access to information, this is a secret society. And then I started digging into that. And yeah, I think that covers the basics of what Gods of Eden had, the impact that book had on me. And in the years that followed that, I was basically a pretty hardcore conspiracy theorist. I shudder at the thought that I listened to the Alex Jones show every day, every weekday. And I'll tell you something, if you think Alex Jones is annoying, his commercials are way worse. Like, at least Alex Jones doesn't have spooky music playing in the background during his whole show. Obviously, sometimes he has spooky music and sometimes he speaks in that spooky voice. But when he does that, it's usually when he's in a commercial for one of his movies. But basically, the commercials for the Alex Jones show is 100% spooky voices with spooky music that's like, catastrophe is coming, buy my guns. Catastrophe is coming, buy my gold. Catastrophe is coming, buy my food. And incidentally, I think all three of those things are good ideas to have, but let's just say fear-based marketing, as effective as it is, not my preferred way of getting your message across. And after that, let's do this chronologically. A friend of mine introduced me to the whole Freeman on the land stuff, which I am very happy to have outgrown. I've already done a video on Marc Stevens and his approach, which I find way more effective. And why take a burden of proof on yourself when you don't even need to? And while I was into the Freeman stuff, yeah, there are numbers on the back of my birth certificate that I don't know what they are. So what? Proving that these numbers are related to some bank account that has millions of dollars in it, whatever. Even if that's true, just proving that would be a task in itself. And even if you could, what good would it give? I remember a friend of mine who made this analogy, which I found really striking. It's like if some mob boss made a deal with your grandfather that he would pay his descendants like $1 million or whatever, and after he dies, and you're like searching through your grandfather's stuff, and you find this document, and then you go to the mob boss and say, hey, according to this paper, you owe me $1 million. And the idea that the mob boss would just read this paper and go, oh shit, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, here's your money, sir. Have a good day, is kind of ludicrous. And the Freeman stuff got me through the movie. Basically, when I was a Freeman, when I was into the Freeman stuff, I was never really a Freeman. It kind of got me into the legalese stuff. I'm still a legalese geek, but I was never serious enough in my research to devote major portions of my free time to studying this. And so basically, I was never really a Freeman, but I was sympathetic to it. And on those message boards, I found a link to the movie 2020 Hindsight, Censorship on the Frontline, which is a movie by Richard Grove, which got me to the Tragedy and Hope community, which I haven't participated in years. If you're watching this from there, hi. But basically, when I landed on the Tragedy and Hope, I discovered the School Sucks podcast back when there was no website, and it was entirely on Podomatic.com. And that show was a landmark event because it introduced me to the non-aggression principle. And that show basically it turned me from a socialist to an anarchist in roughly 48 hours. In casual conversation, I'm usually super conservative and I say less than a week, but I'm pretty sure it was a question of 24 to 48 hours when I was like, holy shit, it's theft when they do it too. Holy shit. Words on paper doesn't change the morality of something. Holy shit. If I steal from you, the stuff that I do with the money isn't a service. And that basically got me into the world of anarchism and libertarianism, and I discovered other shows like via the School Sucks show. I discovered Freedomain Radio, which I had already seen some of Stefan's videos, but to me he was just the bald guy in the red room back then. and I didn't know really anything about him besides the story of your enslavement and another video or two that I had seen, basically linked from that video or whatever. And another show that I discovered was Free Talk Live, which can be a black hole. It's interesting. I haven't listened to that in a while, but it's. I think of all the causes to donate to spread the ideas of freedom, Free Talk Live will be among the highest bangs for your buck, right up there with the Corbett Report. Those two shows, if you're flat broke and you want to donate to liberty causes, I'd consider the Corbett Report and Free Talk Live, because for about $1 a month, which is Corbett's thing, which makes no sense to me, and about $5, you can help bring the ideas of liberty to a bunch of people who had never heard of it and who would instantly think like, but what about the roads and all that stuff? And yeah, the main takeaway from this, I've probably been an anarchist from in the order of 6 to 7 years at this point, and what I've learned through this journey, and I'll have a mini rant on this very shortly. What I've learned from this is the importance of, the pejorative way to put it is to not cast pearls before swine. The better way to put it is, don't waste your time having these huge discussions with people who aren't coachable. And on that, and I will totally refer to this principle, to this phenomenon later on this channel, but I'm glad that I have this video out in advance of this. But that whole period when your mind is blown by new knowledge and you're like really excited about it, and you just want to talk to everyone about it and make sure that everyone knows, and you're not reading the signals that they don't give a shit, or you don't care and you're going forward anyway, which either way it's captive audience, which I've covered already on this channel, but that's not cool. It wastes your time and it turns people off. Like, I don't say this often, but I've thought this so much. I consider myself fortunate that I still had bridges left to burn when I became an anarchist, because I'm looking back at my former conspiracy theorist Sid, and I was fucking annoying, and I can understand how people would have been turned off to that. And sadly, I didn't learn the lessons yet, because I didn't learn the lessons when I became an anarchist, because I was probably equally annoying. And the funny thing is, and this is true no matter what, when you're open to this knowledge and you're excited about it, but you don't understand the knowledge enough to defend challenges in your own words. I remember for a while when I was a newborn anarchist, when people would ask, the common questions, what about the roads, what about the poor, what about the environment, and all that stuff, my answers were often, well, Stefan Molyneux says ... And I think that, yes, referring to other people is useful and it's valid, but when you can't even begin to address an objection in your own terms, even poorly, if you can't even begin to address that objection in your own terms, I think that's a clue that you're not yet ready to be a zealot for this cause or an apostle. I guess people would say that by definition you're a zealot for a cause if you can't even defend it in your own terms. But that would be a clue that you should probably, ponder this knowledge more despite the extreme excitement that you're going through and that I've been through many times. So yeah, that's something to consider. I think I covered the broad lines. So thank you very much for watching. And please like and share. I would be very interested in learning more about your red pill moments, because I'm sure there were many, as I've covered in this video. And if you could follow me on Twitter, and links to my other social media are below here, that would be great, but not half as great as it would be if you subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so yet. So with that note, thank you very much again for watching. I will see you soon, and yeah, you take care.